Welcome back. So I didn't have much of intention of recording this week. I do have a lot of stuff coming up, but shout out Abstract in my Discord. He recommended me this album, and it has stopped me in my tracks ever since I listened to it. It is probably one of the saddest and most brutally raw albums emotionally that I have heard in the past 7 years. So it's by an artist named Dude Central. Now, from that title, you would assume maybe it's more of like a punk album, maybe it's kind of a rock album. It is very much not that. This is one of the few albums that I know of that kind of falls in the category that I don't even know if it falls under a certain genre. Maybe it falls under folk, maybe it falls under a little bit of DIY, a little bit of kind of that kind of thing. But for the most part, I don't think this really has a genre. Mostly because this is a documented processing of grief from the artist because the artist's mother has passed away. So my sincerest condolences to, I believe his name is Elliot Aaron Frost, or Dude Central. My serious condolences because this is a really, really open album in the way that you experience everything. Now, this album doesn't have a lot going on. In fact, it's really only just a guitar, and that's pretty much it in vocals. That's all you're going to get for the most part. I know one song, Goodbye, has a little bit, it sounds like a really muffled organ and a little bit of the vocal processing to make the audio and vocals sound muffled. But for the most part, it is probably the most DIY album I have heard this year, and probably the most DIY album I've heard in the past 7 years. What I mean by that is that you hear a fan going on in the background, probably in the process of making this video. The recording of this album sounds exactly the way that it's sounding right now. You're hearing stuff in the background. You hear audio hiccups. You hear the strings. So, for example, if I was playing a guitar here, you can hear as the fingers are sliding up and down the fretboard. You can hear all of that. The scratches. You can even hear a little bit of mistakes made in the guitar. It's not meant to be this calculated and well-polished experience. This album is really meant to be experienced as someone really going through the process of grief. I don't even know, rating this thing, it's difficult. And it's not to mention, there's not really much to complain about, obviously. Because why would I complain about an album and a person that's just really just getting their emotions out there? It is a very brutally honest listen, and there's no kind of veiled lyricism. There's no kind of poetry to it. It's just really just a person in their room grabs their guitar and is really just playing through a song and kind of just processing what is going on in their mind. Now, the reason why I say this is probably the most emotional and raw album I've heard in 7 years is that this album really reminds me of Mount Erie's A Crow Looked at Me. Mount Erie is the side project of the lead singer of the Microphones fame. And A Crow Looked at Me follows in this very same vein. Now, Mount Erie, A Crow Looked at Me, does have the same kind of feel where it's just an artist and a guitar, but that one has a little bit more of electronic processing, a little bit more electric synths and kind of synthetic drums. But that one was also a documentation of the artist's wife passing away. And it is so brutal. It is so honest. It is so emotionally just devastating. And this album falls in the very same lane. With that, this album is going to be very hard to listen to on repeat listens because it is something that it really isn't meant to be a repeated ongoing listen throughout multiple periods of time. But I will say that this album is very essential to listen through at least once. And the reason why that is I have a grandmother who has dementia in a very far set. And we're thinking she's going to be passing away very soon. And with this album, it's really made me think of the people in my life. It's made me think about my family, my wife, my child. It's made me think of a lot of people in my life, and especially to really take the time, don't take them for granted, and to spend as much time with them as possible. That's the great thing about art. And while this person is going through a lot of emotional grief throughout this album, what it does give the benefit of is that it allows other people to experience that, but also for them to kind of reflect on their own life and kind of change their lives for the better. So for that, Dude Central, Elliot, Frost, I really appreciate what you did with this record. And I appreciate the sincerity, I appreciate the vulnerability, and I appreciate how this album sounds and how you crafted it. It is an amazing work. It is a very honest and it's a very tough listen, but it is worth your time. And even if it's not your thing to listen to this kind of music, I definitely recommend you listen to it once. Now, I'm going to give it a 9. Now, don't take it as that I have any kind of critical thing to not give it a 10. There was even a part of me that didn't even want to give it a rating at all. But again, this album is just very hard to listen, very hard to get through. Some even just the entire process, but it's also a hard album to return to. But I'm glad it exists. I am glad it's a part of my life, and I'm glad that I can comfortably put it in my top 50 albums of the year, because it's definitely going to fall into there. And that's the reason why I wanted to give it a rating, is that I want another place to talk about this record, and that's going to be in my top albums. Spoiler alert, that's what's going to happen. So, if you have any inclination to listen to this from this video, I highly recommend you do. Thank you very much for watching this short little video on this amazing piece of just honesty and just emotional vulnerability. And have a good rest of your day, and also don't take the people in your life for granted. Have a good day.